Greetings everybody. Today I'm going to be walking you through how to use the Nektar Impact LX61 keyboard that is at all of these workstations. That keyboard looks like this, and I'm going to walk you through some of the basic features that you would probably wind up using just about every day when you come into the tech lab and need to create a piece of music or just practice or uh, score something. First of all, this is a USB MIDI controller. It is not a synthesizer. And all that means is that this keyboard is designed to send MIDI information into the computer. It does not create sounds of its own. All it does is send MIDI messages, and more on MIDI messages down the road. But just know that it doesn't have a headphone jack on it. It doesn't produce any audio of its own. It's just sending information to the computer, and the computer is creating the sounds based on the information the keyboard is sending. So going from left to right, over here on the left we've got octave buttons and transpose buttons. This is a 61 key keyboard, and as such it does not have a full 88 key range on it like a regular piano would. So in order to access the lower and higher notes, you're going to use these octave buttons. Whenever you press one, you're going to see the display show a negative value. -1 is 1 octave down, -2 is 2 octaves down. And then you press the up button, you can get back to 0, or you can go up positive numbers. If it says 0, 1, that's up 1 octave, 0, 2 is up 2 octaves. And then the transpose buttons will work in increments of a half step. So if you come in and you find that you're playing the keyboard and it doesn't seem to be playing the key that you think you're playing in, you might want to check the transpose buttons and make sure that they are the right at the right pitch level. You're going to want it to read, when you press the transpose buttons, you're going to want it to read 0. And make sure it's not reading 2 or 3 or even 12. You can do an entire octave there too. This is the pitch wheel that pushes the pitch up or down smoothly, unlike the transpose buttons, which transpose by half step increments. This one allows you to smoothly change the pitch. That's usually used for expression, sliding between notes. The modulation wheel controls certain special effects depending on which kind of sound you're playing into. We have a whole bank of faders and buttons here that we'll get to in a moment, and same thing with these faders, or these rotary knobs. There are 8 percussion pads, and these pads allow you to play either pitched notes of any kind of instrument or percussion sounds, and the sensitivity on them is actually pretty good. So we'll get into some detail about how those work in a little bit. These are transport controls. These are going to, we have it synced up for Ableton Live right now, but you can use it in a lot of different software. The stop, play, and record buttons will be pretty self-explanatory. The backwards and forwards buttons will move the cursor in the software forward or back. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think in Finale it's by measure at a time, and that in Ableton it is a quarter note at a time. The loop feature, it only works in digital audio workstation software like Ableton and Reason and Cubase and Logic. So that turns on the master loop function. These 3 buttons across the top in the master control section are very important, because when you're trying to use the faders and the knobs and the pads, you might find sometimes that they're not acting the way that you expect them to act. And the reason why is because this preset button needs to be pressed to go into preset mode. These are 3 different modes. There's a mixer mode, an instrument mode, and the preset mode. And the preset mode is the one you want to use most of the time in order for all of the functions of the keyboard to work properly, because all of our presets are stored into that first preset mode. These other 2 modes are basically programmable modes that allow you to assign the faders and the buttons and the knobs to all kinds of things within the software. But to get back to our basic presets, we just press the preset button and it takes us right back there. So let's get into a couple of the functions that you'll probably find useful. One of the things that a keyboard like this will do is register the velocity, the hardness with which you press down the keys. As you know, you can play a real piano in a great amount of dynamic range, a great range of loudnesses, from very, very soft to very, very loud. That is in the real piano controlled by how hard you physically press the keys. This keyboard attempts to capture how hard you're pressing the keys and convert that into a digital number, and that conversion process is known as velocity. The velocity with which you hit the key gets registered with a number. And so I'd like you to try this. Go over to your percussion pads on the right and press one of these percussion pads, and the velocity with which you're pressing it will show up here in the window. I'm going to do that on my keyboard and see the first time I got a 101. If I press it harder, I can get it up to 127. If I try to press it really lightly, there's a 1, a 2, 17, some really low values. So it's registering the hardness with which I'm hitting the pad. Well, that ability to record your velocity is happening on every single one of these keys, and that's how it can register how hard and soft you are playing. Well, what happens if you're playing really, really hard, but the instrument doesn't seem to be increasing in volume as hard as you're playing it? Or if you're playing really, really soft, but the instrument seems to be putting out way more volume and way more dynamic, playing at a much higher dynamic than what you feel like you're playing? Well, you can adjust the velocity curve of the instrument, of the keyboard, so that it registers more closely to what you feel that you're doing. So you can adjust the response of the keyboard to your personal playing style, or what you expect the keys to do when you press on them. So I'll walk you through a quick process to show how that works. The way we access this is by pressing the setup button, and then we're going to press this C# key here that's right in the middle of these pads. And that C# key, first of all, when you press setup, you'll see SET will pop up on the display here. And then when you press the C# key, you're going to see VC1, or it might say, depending on how it's been set on your keyboard, it might say VC2, VC3, VC4, VF1, VF2, VF3. It could say any of those. But after you press that and you find whatever velocity setting it says, these two buttons right around middle C have a plus and a minus over top of them. Those are what you're going to use to change this value here. So once you've reached VC1 or whatever the velocity is currently set at, press this C# here, that's your plus key, and that's going to cycle you through the different velocities. So go ahead and do that now. If you haven't already, hit the setup button, hit the C# to enter velocity control, and then hit this plus button to scroll through the different velocities. And I'm doing the same thing here on my keyboard so I can tell you what the displays are saying. VC1 is velocity curve 1, VC2 is velocity curve 2, VC3 is velocity curve 3, VC4 velocity curve 4. VF1 is velocity fixed, and it means that no matter how hard you press the keys or how softly you press the keys, they're going to come out at one volume level. And there might be some instruments for which you want that. VF1, velocity fixed 1, is, I believe, 64. It comes through at a velocity of 64, regardless of how hard you hit the keys. Then VF2, everything comes through at 100, regardless of how hard you hit the keys. And VF3 is a velocity fixed 3, which is 127. That's as loud as an instrument can play. So that forces the piano to play, or the keyboard to play whatever instrument you're playing at the maximum velocity all the time. So those are the 4 settings for velocity. So if you want to try it, and I suggest that you do, scroll back to VC1, velocity curve 1, and then hit the setup button again to exit, and that's going to put you back in play mode. And we're going to go to an instrument. I'll show you how to load an instrument into Ableton Live if it's not already popped up, and we'll try it out. So go with me to Ableton Live. If you don't have it open, just look for this symbol down at the bottom of the dock, and Ableton will open. If you have to wait a moment for Ableton to load, go ahead and pause the video, wait for it to load, and then come back and join us. If you have a number of tracks across the top, you don't have to delete them. Just find one that says MIDI track, and we're going to drop a piano in there. So let's go over to search. We're going to type in, let's type in grand piano. And a number of grand pianos are going to come up. We're looking at these ones here that say grand piano equal. I'm just going to grab this one that says grand piano equal solo, and I'm going to drop it right here where it says drop files and devices here, anywhere in this gray area, and it's going to open up a new MIDI track that has this piano instrument in it. So now when I play the keyboard, the piano is playing. So I'm currently set to velocity curve 1, and I'm going to play something soft and play on up into something loud and see how it responds to me. And I'll have to apologize, I can't actually hear what I'm playing right now because of how the microphone has to be set up, but just trust me, I'm playing soft, and then I'm going to play into loud. So that's velocity curve 1. So the next thing I want to do is get velocity curve 2 or 3 or 4 going. Play through those different velocities. Remember, you're going to do that by hitting setup. That opens up the SET dialog. You're going to hit the C sharp that's to the left of middle C. That's going to open up the VC1, VC2, whatever the velocity curves are currently set at. And then you use the C sharp or the C at middle C, or the C sharp just above it to scroll through the different velocities. So try scrolling through a couple of those different velocities. Maybe a lot of people seem to like velocity curve 4. When you search for this keyword online, it seems like a lot of people like velocity curve 4. And hit setup again to exit velocity, and try playing it again and see what you get. See if you like the result. So that is how you change velocity curves on the keyboard. So another thing that you're able to change is the velocity curve of the percussion pads. And the way you do that is very similar to the way we do the keys. You're going to press the setup key, but now instead of hitting the C sharp below middle C, you're going to hit the D below middle C. And you'll see PC1 will pop up in the top of your display screen. So try that. Hit setup, hit that D, and it will open up PC1. And then you can, again, use the middle C and C sharp key to scroll through your different settings. There's percussion curve 1, percussion curve 2, percussion curve 3, percussion curve 4, and then again, just like with the keypads or the keyboard velocity settings, there's a percussion pad fixed 1, pad fixed 2, pad fixed 3. So if you wanted all of your percussion sounds or whatever instrument you're going to play with those to come through with a single straight velocity, you can adjust it to that. So try scrolling through those as well. Hit setup to exit and test out the pads and see what you think. So that's the basic functions of the keyboard that are pretty. Those are the functions that are going to be true no matter which software you're using. There are some software-specific functions that we'll get into when we start digging into Ableton Live, but to just get you up and running, that's all you really need to know to get started and adjust the keyboard to your tastes and your liking. So there you go.